Greetings and welcome to HillCrest Wine Notes. This is our first of the season shipment as we move into the fall. Right now it's the very end of August. We've had a dry, warm summer with just some cool window here and kind of a wet window here recently. But from here on out, we're really looking forward to what nature brings us. This is what really defines vintages, that last month when fruit is coloring up, ripening up, and it's super susceptible to weather changes. So you can taste that. And to me, great wines always tell the story of the people and the place and the vintage. And so right now that book is being written on 24. We'll see what that has to bring. So with that, if there's a word to kind of convey the wines that we have this release, I would say fine. All these wines are super classic, very elegant, super delicate, complex wines. And that hit me as I was tasting through the wines the other day. Just wow, these all have this kind of this thread that to me is what fine wine is about. It's very easy in the modern world to make really big wines, hyper extracted, that taste like 1, 2, 3 things in that. But as a general rule, the way people go from white to red and sweet to dry, you go from power to elegance. And you want wines with a lot of flavor but very gentle delivery, so it's never overwhelming. And I think all three of these wines hit on that. For our HillCrest release, or Pazzo Collina in this case, we're going to have our first Vigneti, which is a Super Tuscan from the 21 vintage. Then we're going to move into something I didn't think I'd ever actually release one of these, because these wines are really difficult to find at a price point that makes sense for our wine club. But a Barbaresco from the 20 vintage that's super stunning and beautiful. And then a 21 Riesling from a dear friend of ours that I've known for, I hate to say it, almost 40 years. From a very, very, very special old vineyard, special in the world context too. So with that, we'll get started. Many people wonder when we purchased Misty Oaks, what's happened up there. We've grafted a lot of those vineyards over. It was kind of a mix, generally speaking, of Burgundian and Bordeaux varieties. So Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Pinot Blanc, and then Cabernet Sauvignon, Cab Franc, Malbec, a little bit of Merlot. And we've done a lot of grafting, and we've done a lot of grafting to Italian reds. You've had the Sangiovese Riserva. This is one of the two sub-blocks that we have. So we have two different clones of Sangiovese. One is what's called the Brunello clone, Brunello being a little brown one, and it's the most powerful, very tannic, very deep selection of Sangiovese, which is kind of a standout from what classically Sangiovese is. In Tuscany, they talk about Sangiovese being the Pinot Noir of Tuscany. So we tend to look at it in America as like, oh, it's big, treat it like Cabernet Sauvignon. They're the old style, what are known as the Chianti clones, as opposed to the Brunello clone. The Chianti clones are very delicate, cherry, super fine selections. And so that's what this selection is. We have a little bit of both out in the vineyard. So anyway, we'll take her for a spin. So Super Tuscan refers to something, began in the very early 70s and 71 with a gentleman by the name of Piero Antinori. I wanted to make wines that didn't conform to Chianti Classico, Chianti Riserva, and those are very, very stringent in terms of what you can plant, how you pick, how the wines are made, including blending being a big part of that, what you can and can't, and percentages and that. He wanted to break that but make very high-end wine, and there was no room for that. You had to sell the wine as table wine, vino di tavola. And so he basically said, well, I'm going to make a table wine, but it's going to be great, and this term was coined of Super Tuscan, which is something that doesn't conform. It's table wine, but it's meant to be of the very highest level. And so this is our Super Tuscan. We do the 100% Sangiovese. In the case of the Riserva, this has a little bit of Malbec, a little bit of Cab Franc in it, off the same property. So. Super, when I think of Sangiovese, I think of like cherry. This has like really, really like sweet cherry character perfume to it, which you see more and more wines have black fruit from Tuscany, but a lot of that has to do with blending of things like Syrah and Cabernet into it, which tends to dominate. But a little bit of spice in the back end of that, almost like a nutmeg and a little bit of this kind of balsamy character I talk about sometimes. Very full but gentle, very fine tannins. Tannins come in kind of like mid-length, but super, super fine. The tannins are more in line with like Pinot Noir tannins, which is very, very intentional for us. Those are the tannins of very, very beautifully ripe Sangiovese. Flavors persisting, nice acidity. You know, Italian reds are probably the greatest food wines in the world because of the acidity they have. And this Sangiovese in our area, I've talked about this in prior videos, one of the things that brought us up here is the acidity in the wines. It helps the wines age, develop, but it makes also for wines that are very fine and beautiful at the table because of the effect of acid on food flavors and vice versa. But hopefully you'll enjoy this. Beautiful label. This is part of the Pazzo Collina series. You've seen that with the Reserva. Next, we're going to move on to what I consider to be the finest wines as a region out of Italy, which is out of the north, near the town, near Milan, but Alba is kind of the core city for Piemonte, which means foot of the mountains, which is foot of the Alps as you drop out of the north. And that there's a fairly large valley that's protected, which is kind of the beginning of what's called the Po Valley, where risotto is grown, and that kind of goes off into the Adriatic, kind of like a 45-degree angle down through Modena, Emilia-Romagna, and dumps out into the Adriatic. In that, there's a pocket, and you have two areas, two villages, Barbaresco and Barolo, and they're 100% Nebbiolo, most difficult grape in the world to grow, a grape that is the first to push in the spring and the last to ripen. So it's this huge season that's susceptible to both spring frost in the spring, of course, and fall frost, fall rain in this. Very, very delicate. The challenge with it is Nebbiolo has high acid and high tannin, and that's like the skeleton of a grape, and then you have the fruit that's the flesh that kind of covers the bones. Nebbiolo has oftentimes the bones kind of poke out through the skin, and it's really hard to get something with enough fruit that just kind of covers that. It's also like Pinot Noir in a way that Pinot Noir has very light color and can be super complex. Most grapes that are, if you want a lot of flavor, complete flavor for reds, you need kind of more complete color, darker color than that. Nebbiolo, like Pinot Noir, you can have wines that are super light in color but have incredible flavor and complexity. This is 2020 vintage, which is kind of the perfect vintage, not too hot, not too cold. A lot of super beautiful reds out of the 20 vintage throughout Europe in that. But a producer has what's known as a monopole, basically has a vineyard called Ronchi, which is the name of their property. Also, they own a fairly large piece of vineyard that they do different bottlings out of, and this is their Barbaresco, which is kind of a higher end version of the Nebbiolo in Piemonte. So 2020 vintage shows kind of a little bit of the warmth of that vintage, a little bit of kind of sweet, soft smell. I get roses. So a lot of wines, and I'd say most wines, reds have more kind of fruit aromatics. We talk about red fruit, black fruit. Nebbiolo, the Romans said tar and roses, and actually they use that term so much to describe Nebbiolo, and they like those wines so much that when the Romans would conquer areas and they'd bring red wine production there, they would take the vessels that they'd age the wine in and put tar in the inside of it, so it tasted like these wines, Barolo, Barbaresco, this kind of thing. This has rose petal. Beautiful kind of floral component, a little bit of an earthiness to it. This is the area of mushrooms as well, of truffles and that. But just beginning a little bit of bottle bouquet, but that real kind of like, almost like a smoky but super light, but very kind of deep note to that tar component. The wine just kind of like billows out like a steam in my mouth. Fruit, lots of places. Tannins just starting to come, a pretty good dose of tannins. I mentioned Nebbiolo is high in both tannin as well as acidity. The acidity here is buried very, very nicely. The tannins mean that this wine goes with a lot of very rich things, things that are very fatty, things even with, I think about like wild mushroom risotto with maybe some wild venison in it, that kind of thing, roasted meats and that, but super beautiful. It looks so fine and delicate in the color. When you look at the color, you'll see it's already kind of like a bricky brown, which is typical of Nebbiolo. It's a grape that tends to produce kind of more reddish, slightly brown wines when young versus kind of the young purpley kind of thing that we're used to here on the West Coast. So, but yeah, super beautiful. Yum, yum. Also important, if you can pour this in something like a Pinot glass, that would dramatically change. As wines like that, the stemware is super important. To finish up with, dear friends of ours, Vinny Reh, who I met in '86, many years ago, or moons ago, in Germany. We've gone back, and he produces some of the most stunning kind of unknown wines in the Mosel, in the middle Mosel in particular, which is kind of the tenderloin, the best part of the Mosel. 21 vintage, ultra fine. The whites from 21 out of Europe, to me, are really spectacular. Reds can be a little bit of a challenge with a couple of exceptions, but this wine comes off, this is all ungrafted. So this is plantings from 1906 that it's just Riesling stuck in the ground in just rock piles of slate, which are really beautiful. Alten Reben, which is what the wine is called, means old vine. So super beautiful. So this kind of musky fruit. Some Riesling is more kind of green apple, like the cooler parts in the blue slate of the Mosel Valley, you get more kind of green apple character. This has almost like muskmelon, kumquat, kind of really deep, sweet, but not sticky sweet kind of character to it. Just super, almost floral, citrusy, but really beautiful in the nose. Beautiful, elegant, full. This is kind of on the drier side. So this is something I think is beautiful food wine. I think about a steelhead, halibut, that kind of grilled fish, maybe chicken with very light sauce or just only seasoning on it. But super bright, elegant. I may just keep salivating. Like green apple kind of character to it, like way biting a green apple makes you do. But very fine. Something I think, this is a style of wine that is very popular in Germany that isn't really well known outside of America, what are known as the Trocken style, and Trocken being dry, it's the majority of what they make. So this is kind of if this is the sweeter style that we know in America, this is over here. So quite interesting, different play on a classic grape from one of the most famous areas in the world for it. Maybe the most famous, if that. So with that, I'd like to say we really appreciate your support. Our family's dream was to come here to Umpqua Valley and find our little piece of heaven, produce wines, and help kind of develop what we believe is one of the greatest wine growing regions in the world, and really kind of manifest the fine character of great wine that Umpqua has the potential of producing. So your support of our wines does that. So with that, to the genie in the bottle. Cheers.